wasn't supposed to be like this. Humanity was the joke of the galaxy, a race of primitives barely worthy of interstellar notice. But when the Xal'Thar armada arrived, something unexpected happened, something that would change the fate of the universe forever. The Galactic Council had observed Earth with a mixture of amusement and disdain. The species calling itself humanity had barely scratched the surface of interstellar travel, relying on primitive reaction-based propulsion and an alarming reliance on chemical warfare. Their civilizations warred amongst themselves, their politics were messy, and their technology was impressive for a race so young, was crude in comparison to the great empires of the stars. When the Xal'Thar fleet entered the solar system, no one batted an eye. It was meant to be a routine extermination. The Xal'Thar were conquerors, apex predators of the galaxy. They had turned hundreds of planets into graveyards, their fleets consuming civilizations like wildfire. Earth, by all accounts, was another ember waiting to be snuffed out. But something was different this time. The humans didn't run, they didn't surrender, they didn't even try to negotiate. They fought. And they fought like no species had ever fought before. Admiral Garvex of the Xal'Thar flagship Oblivion Spear stood on the bridge of his massive warship, the shimmering tactical display before him showing the unfolding invasion. The humans were barely putting up a fight, he thought. Their primitive satellites were swept aside like dust in the wind, and their orbital defenses had been reduced to molten slag within hours. He leaned forward, mandibles clicking in amusement. Pathetic. Then, without warning, a bright flash appeared on the holomap. A human warship, a crude, blocky thing, had just rammed one of his destroyers. The impact overloaded the Xal'Thar ship's reactor, sending a fireball of debris and shrapnel into two nearby cruisers. The explosion was massive, far beyond what should have been possible for such a primitive vessel. And then another human vassal did the same. And another. Admiral Garvik's amusement was replaced with confusion, then alarm. The humans were deliberately sacrificing their own ships just to take his down. No species fought like this. No species would willingly throw themselves into the jaws of destruction in such a reckless, suicidal manner. Yet the humans did. On the ground, things were no better. The first waves of Xal'Thar shock troops met resistance unlike anything they had encountered before. Human soldiers fought with a ferocity that defied logic. They had no shields, no energy weapons, yet they fought tooth and nail, using kinetic rifles that tore through Xal'Thar armor with brutal efficiency. In the dense ruins of their cities, human snipers hunted the invaders with ruthless precision. Improvised explosives collapsed entire buildings on top of advancing forces. Civilians took up arms, striking from the shadows, using guerrilla tactics that the Xal'Thar simply weren't prepared for. When the orbital bombardments began, humanity didn't just rely on brute force. They fought with code. AI-driven cyber attacks infiltrated Xal'Thar systems mid-battle, turning ships against each other, shutting down targeting systems, and even venting entire decks of Xal'Thar vessels into space. The fleet that had been so sure of victory now found itself in chaos. What should have been a swift extermination turned into a war of attrition. A war the Xal'Thar were unprepared to fight. Weeks passed, and the Xal'Thar advance slowed to a crawl. Every kilometer gained was paid for in blood. Every city they occupied became a death trap. Their supply lines were stretched thin, constantly ambushed by human strike teams who seemed to appear and disappear at will. Earth's factions, once divided, were now united in a way that had never been seen before. Old rivalries were cast aside in the face of extinction. But the Xal'Thar High Command would not accept defeat. In desperation, they unleashed their most fearsome weapons, the Eradicators. These bioengineered monstrosities were the stuff of nightmares. Towering creatures, bred for one purpose: extermination. Their armored hides shrugged off human weapons, and their razor-sharp limbs could cut through steel as if it were paper. The moment they were deployed, humanity's resistance faltered. Entire battalions were wiped out in hours. Cities that had held for weeks fell overnight. For the first time since the war began, it seemed as if humanity's luck had run out. But then humanity did what it did best. They adapted. In a desperate gamble, human scientists and engineers began pushing the limits of their own biology and technology. They experimented with genetic modifications, cybernetic enhancements, and neural-linked combat squads. What emerged from the laboratories and underground bunkers were no longer just soldiers. They were something more. Cybernetic warriors, their minds linked to advanced AI battle networks, coordinated strikes with impossible precision. Augmented commandos, enhanced beyond natural human limits, tore through Xal'Thar forces with terrifying efficiency. Humanity didn't just match the Xal'Thar, they surpassed them. And then, in an act that would shake the galaxy, humanity went on the offensive. They hijacked Xal'Thar warships, modifying them with their own brutal ingenuity. They developed weapons so devastating that even the Galactic Council hesitated to comprehend them. And finally, in a maneuver no one thought possible, humanity did the unthinkable. They took the war to the Xal'Thar homeworld. The Xal'Thar homeworld had never known war. No enemy had ever set foot on its surface. The very idea was unthinkable. Until the day human warships emerged from hyperspace above the planet, bristling with stolen technology and weapons designed for one purpose: retribution. The battle was swift and brutal. Xal'Thar defenses, designed to repel conventional threats, were useless against the sheer unpredictability of human tactics. Entire cities were reduced to ash. The very heart of the Xal'Thar Empire burned under the fury of those they had once sought to annihilate. Admiral Garvex, now stripped of his rank, watched in horror as his home world crumbled. In his final moments, as human soldiers stormed the last stronghold, he whispered a single phrase: "We should have never come here." The fires of war painted the horizon, casting long shadows across the ruins. He took a deep breath, the weight of victory heavy on his shoulders. "We were supposed to die," he murmured, his voice rough from exhaustion. "We were supposed to be another footnote in their history books." He tightened his grip on his weapon, gazing up at the distant stars. "But we're still here, and now the galaxy knows what happens when you push us too far." He turned to his soldiers, their eyes reflecting the same unyielding determination that had carried humanity through hell and back. "Let's go remind them